Now, Nathan, before we hit record, you and I had a really interesting conversation. You said that when it comes to travel security, one of the big mistakes that you see a lot of practitioners making is getting too attached to policies, procedures, and templates, and that this approach can really backfire once you see it implemented in the field. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure, happy to. And that's not to detract from the value of having policies, procedures, or best practices, right? It's just remaining agile with the idea that sometimes what a practice might have worked for one region, say like Afghanistan, will not work in another area that's completely different. The culture is different, your resources are different, maybe the risk profile for your client is different. So having that understanding that having a checklist is obviously useful and it should be done. Remaining aware that sometimes you need to adjust stuff and that you might need to add an addendum to that, depending on risk profile, region, what have you, the context, right, for the travel itself.
Right. So, what might be some of the, I guess, the unintended consequences of trying to be too rigid with your templates and procedures?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the primary consequence would be if something happens that catches you out of the blue, right? Something that's unexpected in the moment, but probably when you've had time after the dust is settled and you've done the lessons learned, or even maybe 20 minutes later, you realize that probably okay, maybe we should have addressed this. Maybe the culture was different, the risk profile was completely different for the client. Maybe something was happening, seasonal weather, what have you, that probably we should have addressed before we launched this operation, activity, travel, or what have you.
And I get kind of curious too, like, what are the kind of main reasons that you think a lot of people are stuck in this behavior of kind of coming at everything with the templates or sticking rigidly? Uh, I like the first thing that would pop into my head would just be like regulatory requirements or
Sure.
inexperience and things like that. But I'd be kind of curious what you've seen.
Yeah, I think it's very complex, right? Right, the reasons why this might be a concern, and not saying that this is the primary concern. We've got plenty of things to talk about when it comes to security risk management, for sure. Areas of improvement and standards and everything else. But I think the primary reason why this might be something that crops up every once in a while is because a lot of security departments are honestly overtasked. So they don't have that additional time to really do a deep dive into every single occurrence or operation that they're responsible for. So it takes a very agile mindset to be aware of what's happening in the world and understand that when you've got something that crops up in one specific location, one region, you're aware that, okay, the context has changed. If there's one word that I use too much every day, it's the word context, because it's super critical to understanding what you should do, how you should protect an asset, whether it's a person, reputation, people, whatever. But context helps shape how you should approach a problem and come up with a solution. So I think that's probably the primary reason why it's missed, because most security departments are usually overtasked. So you've got a checklist, you've got the regulatory or the standards that you use, and that's good. You should have that. You should always be looking at updating them, refreshing them. But yeah, I think it's mainly because they're overtasked and they don't have that ability to slow down sometimes, take that pause, that tactical pause, and evaluate the situation before deploying.
Right. Well, I think every organization, especially nowadays, is trying to run. We're trying to get the work of two people out of one person and things like
Sure,
that. So,
sure.
yeah, I'd be curious, and I understand this is a security podcast. Sometimes people can't talk too much about what they've worked on and things like that. But I'd be curious if there was a time or a situation where you really learned this lesson yourself, and where this kind of lesson became crystal clear during your experience.
Yeah, I wouldn't pull out like an exact scenario. I would say this is really just coming from a few years ago, the way that we do travel risk as a company, as an organization for our clients, how we had done it in the past. And I was tasked out with, this is what we've done. Let's try to improve upon it. And in typical fashion, I decided to burn it down and start over again. And kind of the process that we use, I call it like the I-trips method. It's agile enough, the introduction, the threats, the risks, the individual actions that you take, the emergency planning, and then the considerations. It's flexible enough so you still follow the same process no matter where you're going, but your responses and your responses for managing that trip, your guidance to the traveler, whoever that's traveling, is going to be modified based on for their risk profile and the destination that they're going to. So they're aware of, they know, like when we go through these briefings with them, they know the format, and it's a good training opportunity for us. The format's the same, but the context and the content will change. So it's kind of solidifies for them over time, no matter if they're going to Kenya or if they're going to, Australia, honestly.
Gotcha. This kind of segues a bit into what I wanted